Hey, hey, hey! Welcome, everybody, to the Musician's Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Travis Mark, and today I have the wonderful pleasure of speaking with the amazing bass player, singer, songwriter, producer, Rachel Loy. Rachel is originally from Austin, Texas, but moved to Nashville in around 2008 and has credits with stars like Vince Gill, Willie Nelson, Dolly, Parton, Brothers Osborne, Toby Keith, Kenny Chesney, Garth Brooks, Carrie Underwood. The list goes on and on and on and on. So, as usual, I'm not going to blabber on too much in the introduction. I'll put all of her information in the show notes. You should totally check her out. She's super insightful. But before I stop this introduction, please do me a favor and give us a review or a rating on your preferred streaming platform. We appreciate it. But for now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Rachel Loy. Hey Rachel, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Sorry I missed you. My phone's on a setting where...
No problem. I get it. You know, you're probably usually in sessions and things like that, so I totally understand.
Exactly.
How's life? How's everything? How was Christmas and how was everything?
Oh, it was great. I have like a million children, so it was maximum magic. And they're also old enough now that there's a lot less like physical labor involved with the magic. So it was really, really fun.
That's cool. How many kids do you have?
3.
Boys or girls?
I have a girl who's 9, a boy who's 7, and a girl who's 5.
Oh wow, yeah. So you really have your hands full.
Yeah. Well, not like I did, 3 years ago. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, it was like so much more intense than it is now. So now I'm just like, this is easy.
Wow.
They have reason and logic and they can grab their own snacks. It's amazing.
That's amazing. You know, I actually I didn't have any of this prepped in regards to being a musician and the responsibilities of having children, but this is totally something we should talk about during the course of the interview, because you know, like the whole thing here is to talk about some of the stuff that a lot of people don't talk about. I'm trying to talk about the real how to be a human and function as a working musician.
Yeah,
You know.
absolutely.
So
Interesting.
well,
Complicated.
yeah, complicated. That's for sure. You know. All right. So Rachel, firstly, thank you for doing this. I will do a introduction for you post recording. But
Cool.
something that I do with everybody that I interview is I ask them to do an introduction for themselves, just so our listeners kind of know what you're about, where you're coming from, who you are. So if you wouldn't mind, tell us who Rachel Loy is.
Well, I am a musician of all kinds. I'd say most people know me as a bass player, and I have made a lot of my living playing in Nashville studios on country records and demos. And I'm also a producer. Mostly, a lot of the acts that I have produced that are well known are country acts, mostly from the Texas region. And I'm also an artist, always have been. Make my own records throughout all of the years. No matter what I'm doing, I'm always writing songs and making records. And sometimes I'm playing shows. And I'm also a mother of 3 children and wife to my husband. And yeah, general life vacuum. I just try to get as much life out of my life as I can.
That's amazing. That's amazing. A laugh vacuum. I've never heard that. I kind of like it. Very cool. So I did a little bit of research on you, obviously prior to the interview, and I noticed that you're a Berkeley graduate. Here's a bit of a strange question, because I know that there seem to be 2 schools of thought when it comes to music education.
Mhm.
But how important do you feel? I'm sorry, I said do a feel. How important do you feel that attending sort of a music education facility like Berkeley is if you want to be a musician?
Oh man, I do not think it is required. I think it depends completely on where you're coming from. Let's say you come from a small town and a small circle, and you want to be a professional music and break into bigger scenes. It's a great way to sort of insert yourself into the industry, and it's also obviously a great learning experience. But I guess what I think about music education is that it helps accelerate your fluency in the language, but ultimately what we're doing is learning a language. And there's so many methods of doing that. And immersion, without ever having a teacher, is a very valid way of doing that. So I don't think that being a great musician requires that you learn how to quantify it in these little pieces that can be graded. I think that it just depends on where you're coming from financially, geographically. And if you get inserted into a great scene of musicians that help your fluency of music and you find ways to stay challenged, then you can do that without a college. But for me, music education was really appealing because I was I was like really into high achieving. Like I got great grades in high school. And I was sort of disappointed when I found out that to get into Berkeley, you can have a GED. I was like, what did I do all that work for?
That's
but
amazing.
yeah, but I really wanted to get out of the region I was in and have some independence from my family and everything else. And because I was so ambitious, my entire senior year and half of in the summer before, I practiced for a scholarship, and I was able to get a full ride to Berkeley. And because of that, it was kind of a no brainer. But had I been paying as much as it actually cost, it would not have been a no brainer. It would have maybe been more like, I'm going to go there for a year and see what I learn and see who I meet and then kind of take it from there. Because, if you go into a job in music, there is no salary guaranteed ever, even at the point when you have tons of experience and you've been in it for a long time. So I don't think paying for a music education is like necessarily a good move. It's really just about pursuing fluency.
Yeah, completely. And also, nowadays we're living in a time where, okay, maybe too much so, but there's so much sort of resource out there that
Mm,
if you kind of sift through it, you could probably find the information you want, depending on the person. Some people
yeah.
don't have that drive that maybe you need to do it independently, but a lot of people do. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean
If
that's
you
that's a
have,
fair
then you
point.
can.
Yeah,
Hmm.
completely.
So true. And also, like, the genres of music that actually make the most money in the US are full of uneducated musicians. I mean, from pop producers who I was just talking to, I was just co-writing with a friend. They were telling me that she was telling me that she was writing with a pop producer that like completely uses the keyboard on his laptop to play all the instruments and is completely self-taught. Is like super Gen Z. Like, I mean, this guy's never even played a keyboard, and
Wow.
he's making music that's probably freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many ways of going about it. How fast technology advances, you know, the education, the colleges aren't necessarily up to date. And going to Berkeley, which is a contemporary music school, a lot of times there's sort of this like insertion of like really smart music into contemporary music that once you get out of that scene is kind of nerdy and like out of touch. So much of like the music education scene is about, like I said, like the parts of music that you can quantify and grade and like mark correct or incorrect. And in pop music, in country music, in rock, and all these places that really is the main musical export of the U.S., like none of the musicians are concerned with any of that.
Yeah.
And you can you can be a super expert rock musician with like hard-won tone and um, hard-won, like a hard-won bag of tricks that's like really deep and really special, and never have ever learned how to read a note. So
True. And
mhm.
Paul McCartney, he can't read.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Case in point. Of course, if you want to be a jazz, even the old school jazz musicians all played by ear. But you know, if you want to be in classical, or if you want to be in composing, or like film music, I'm sure education would help, and it really does help get you fluent quicker. So I was
true.
grateful for that.
Cool. And now you're originally from Austin, Texas, but you
Hmm.
relocated to Nashville. And from what
Hmm.
I read, that was around sort of 2007, 2008. Um,
Yeah.
Talk us through a couple things here. Talk us through the highs and lows you encountered when relocating. And
Mm.
more so, and I've done this so I can probably relate, but more so, talk us through the steps you took on trying to rebuild a career in a new place.
Yeah, and it was very different rules, different culture. So when we got to Nashville, we were coming from the live music capital of the world, where the whole musician community would all kind of like meet at the bars and watch each other play, and go to each other's shows and get on the same shows together, and that kind of thing. And when we got to Nashville, that's immediately where we went. We went to live music and to try to find other musicians to sort of plug into. And now, when we went to Nashville, we were intentional about knowing what we wanted. We didn't want to relocate into an identical scene. We wanted to get into the next level of making money in music, because we were tired of, being in our mid 20s and hitting our head on the ceiling in Austin. Um, so we quickly figured out that professional musicians in Nashville don't go hear live music.
Hmm.
There are plenty of people, great musicians, in fact, who play on Broadway and play live all the time. But that felt like kind of continuing what we had done in Austin to us. So we clearly, in our minds, we were clear on the fact that we didn't want to go that route in Nashville. So we just kind of explored until we figured out that all the musicians who play on the road for country acts, which is kind of what we were wanting to do, also co-write with published writers and that kind of thing, that all of those musicians and that scene, that whole Music Row scene, hung out at bars, and were and we could kind of know where they were going to be based on which night was a 2-for-1 night. So we just found all the 2-for-1s and started going. We just figured out we need to go drink every night, and we did.
That's kind of amazing, actually. Yeah, I was actually going to ask you to clarify the 2-for-1 thing. I was thinking wait, is this like one of those kind of venues where they'll do, because, I know sometimes in Nashville with the songwriter rounds, they'll do a set group of people, and then it'll kind of stop for a while, and then there'll be another set group of people. And I was thinking, is that what the 2-for-1 thing is? Or are you
Nope.
thinking about drinking? So that's
Talking about
kind of
drinking.
crazy. You're talking about alcohol. That's amazing. Wow. Wow. And let me clarify. So you're saying we. Who is this? You went with your husband or for some
Yeah,
friends or
my boyfriend. By the time we'd been in Nashville a year and a half, we were married. But when we moved there, we were boyfriend and girlfriend.
that's amazing. What does he
And
play?
yeah, he is an amazing songwriter. His first instrument is keys, but he has made most of his mark as a writer.
Cool. Cool.
Hmm. He's an incredible instrumentalist, though. He plays so many things. He's just freakishly talented. So
That's amazing. That's amazing.
yeah,
Let's give
and
him
it was
let's
great
give him a
to have
shout out. What's his name?
Brian Keane, Keane.
There you go. Go check him out, everybody.
He's really now. There's 2 Brian Keanes on Spotify. One of them is a guy who does film stuff, and you can tell his music sounds really like it's from all areas of the world. Brian's music sounds like songwriter, Texas country, and he looks younger than this guy. So Spotify's got things mixed up sometimes and mixes up their music, but Brian Keane is the young looking guy with an acoustic guitar.
Cool. Yeah, I'll totally check him out. That sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, I kind of jumped in on your question there, or your answer there. I'm sorry, but
Mm-hmm.
so let's backtrack a little. So rebuilding the career and stuff like that. Let's talk
Mhm.
about that. What were some of the hardest things you encountered?
I think the hardest thing about breaking into Nashville is, this scarcity of jobs and the how many great players there are and how easy the music is to play. So you have like all these amazing players, um, sort of standing in line waiting for a chance to play Mary Had a Little Lamb better than any of the other guys.
Hmm.
What's amazing about Nashville is how, because of the scarcity of work and because of the nature of the personalities who will relocate to Nashville in order to pursue it, it's highly competitive and people become amazing players because of that. And you show up on to a rehearsal or to an audition or to a session, and you better bring it, or there's like a bunch of better guys who will take your place next time. And not only should you bring it, you should also make your mark and be special and be an asset to everybody, whether it's through your personality or whether it's through what you offer musically or gear wise or whatever it is. You really, it's just highly competitive, and I've always found that really thrilling because I'm like, yeah, let's go, let's do this. So we did. Every time I showed up, I learned the music really well or wrote it down so I could read it. And that's another great thing I got from my education that made things easier for me. It was the ability to learn lots of music and access it on the page. So that's great. Um, but yeah, by the time I got my first session call, I had been in Nashville for like a year and a half, and it was not easy. It was kind of cold. But there was about 6 months of great things happening in Nashville, really warming up to me that led to my first session. And then once I had my first session, it became more of a like, okay, you're in the clique now. Um, and it got a little easier.
Yeah, that's cool. And
Yeah.
also quite a it shows the characteristic. I mean, a year and a half is really quick, to kind of
Mm.
get into those circles. So that's killer, man. That's really good.
Well, and that was luck. There's so much luck that plays into it. I the moment of luck was when this writer who at the time had one number one when I met him, and then proceeded to get like I don't know, like six number ones
Hmm.
consecutively after that. He invited me to be in his band before he even saw me play bass, just based on me singing my own songs on acoustic guitar and singing. And the guys in his band were iconic session players at the time. So
Wow.
my moment of luck was when this songwriter, who was a lot more free and right brains than most people in Nashville in the music industry, kind of said, "I like you. Why don't you come to be in my band? We're looking for a bass player." And then I showed up, but I was ready. I was like, I knew who was in the band, and I made sure that I was going to bring it. And I also had 10 years of professional playing experience behind me. So, there's a lot of things you get from that, like good tone and a good musical sense for improvising in the genres that you're comfortable with. And by the time I showed up to that first rehearsal, I was ready to um, like be in the same band as these iconic players, and they noticed and they started calling me for stuff, and that's how it happened for me. But that moment where I got invited in, that's the moment where luck really plays in, and you never know how long it's going to take.
Of course. Of course. Well, I'm super stoked that that happened. I mean, I don't know you personally, kind of thing, but I love hearing success stories, and that to me is success. So that's incredible.
Thank
Um,
you.
Now let's kind of change direction here a little bit. So obviously, when you're playing as a sort of sideman kind of musician, when you're the person in somebody else's band, often
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of roles, if you want to use that word, they get kind of typecast. And a lot of times people will know the artist or whoever the singer is and not necessarily know the band. But you yourself, you've been quite successful as a songwriter and an artist. Let's talk
Mm-hmm.
about you as a songwriter. When did you
Yeah.
start writing and what's your approach to writing? Is it purely to be artistic and sort of go with what you're feeling? Or given that you're living in the songwriting capital of the world, are you writing from more of a commercial sort of mindset?
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, well, the origins of my writing have always been as a tool for self expression and for just joy. Like, I get so much fulfillment out of making what's inside of me into something that is like a thing. And, that's sort of just the definition of why artists create art. It's like, you know, take what's inside and make it real, And I've gone through different phases with my writing. There have been times where all of my writing energy goes towards my co-writes and sort of like leveraging my talent to get cuts or to get a publishing deal. Although when I first started, I was 13 and my sister and I had a band in Austin and we played live every weekend all through high school, and that was great. And then I went to college and kind of focused on my bass playing for a little while. But then I wrote this song about a soldier. And at the time, I was also in this girl band, blah, 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 that was sort of on the edge of getting a record deal, but we had been exposed to some major labels. And the Sony Epic heard this song because of that sort of girl band situation. And they got sent the song, and I got signed as an artist while I was in college to Sony Epic. And that was like this huge whirlwind of a thing that sort of like solidified in me, like, oh, I am an artist. Like, this is who I am. This is a viable thing that I have to offer. I do have something special here. And that was the main thing that I pursued for years until, like after the record deal dried up, I went to Austin and made a few records and toured behind that. And every time that I was writing for that, it was always from the perspective of this is me as an artist, but also like, what song is going to go over really well for the audience that I'm writing for. I've always had an audience in mind when I'm writing. Sometimes that audience is just my husband because he's like one of the greatest writers in the world, in my opinion. So writing for him is like basically how honest am I being and how great is this song? So he's really the perfect audience to write for. But there have been times where I'm writing for, if all I have access to is small bars when I'm touring or a college crowd when I'm touring, like I tend to think about that audience when I write, and it sort of those limitations can be inspiring sometimes. And then when I've been in Nashville as a writer, started out just like kind of I want to switch my writing to this way of thinking where you're always kind of trying to write this perfectly crafty, very lyric heavy, sort of musically light song with this structure and this time length and this tempo. And I've had years where that's been really inspiring for me. And I go that way and I get really good at being this like song machine person for whoever I'm co-writing with. But there always reaches a time when I'm doing that where I fatigue on it and I go, I'm just sick of hearing myself write the same stuff all the time. Like, I'm done. I'm just going to make a record. And then I make a record or then I start writing more free and I throw a bunch of stuff at the wall until something starts to stick. And when I find my new thing, I make a record.
That's cool.
That's kind of been my process.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I'm going to use it as a segue to go back into family stuff like we were talking about in the beginning. So you play your songs for your husband. I'm going to try and not load this question too loady, if that's even a word.
Yeah, sure. I'm not.
But yeah, so I mean, it sounds like you guys have been together for a while. What is the hardest part about playing a song for your husband? Like, will he be critical enough to kind of go, that lyric wasn't too good, or oh, I love that song, but is he that kind of guy, or is he just flat out supportive, like, hey, every song's great?
Well, he's always supportive, but the great thing about Brian is that and us too, that we've grown into this place where we know that a song is its own life. So if he's going to come back with a tweak or a criticism of the song, we trust each other enough now. Now, this hasn't always been the case. Like, there's definitely been times in our younger, selves that I'm self-conscious about it and I kind of take it personally and I see it as an attack on my abilities or whatever. But now, and this comes in handy as a producer too, when I'm working with artists, it's like, no, the song is the song. This is the job. Does this song objectively need work? Or is this song objectively perfect? Like, what, and he knows enough about the craft that, let's say I bring him a song that I love, and I'm excited about it. If he says, oh man, that's great, and what if you did that here, did change this line here or change that line there, I am that's such valuable information for me, because for me as a writer, I know what it means to me. But if I'm not in the act, you can't really get information on how well a song is working until you play it for an audience of any size, whether it's Brian, who is coming from a place of really understanding the process of writing and really just knowing more about it than me, I would say, or as much, or we're totally like, um, you know, uh, we're both in the crafting together, or whether it's playing it for an audience at the Bluebird, or at uh, some other venue or whatever, like, or if I was an artist that was on the road all the time and I got to try out songs with my audience, but you don't really know if it's working until you feel energy come back. So playing it for Brian's just another version of that. It's just a more efficient one, because he can be like, yeah, I kind of lost interest here. Maybe you should, you know, change this part up here or that part up there. But he's always coming from a place of, I love what you do. You're really awesome. And there's never a criticism that he gives me that's based on insecurity or needing to cut me down or anything like that. So it's a very safe place.
That's cool. And what about your children? Are they musical?
It's kind of hard to tell at this point. I think all of them are musical. I don't think all of them have the same like ambition that I have, or like sense of overachieving the way that I did when I was their age. But that's awesome. Like, in my older age, I've come to see that part of me as a little bit more of an expression of brokenness than like a huge asset. So when my children be secure enough to just like do what they want to do, and like they are all in piano lessons, because to me that feels like, it just feels like an education thing. Like, start learning the language of music. And then if you want to pursue it more, great. Either way, you're always going to have a rudimentary understanding of the language. And I think that's just important for anybody. But there's been no like, shining star of musical genius in my kids yet. But I think it's very likely that any of them could head that way when they decide they're into it,
Yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, tell us about working with legends like Willie Nelson and Dolly Parton. In particular, what advice would you offer on keeping your nerves in check when getting into a room or getting the call with artists of that magnitude?
Well, I've always been gifted with like when I get nervous or there's pressure, I kind of like my game gets upped more than like it doesn't use it's usually uh like easier for me to play well when I feel pressure. It's just like a personality thing that was inserted into me at birth. I don't know. I can't take credit for it. But I will say that I have been nervous on like a social level, like how to handle yourself around people who have a lot of power. And to me, the key is to just be cool and listen, and like not talk about yourself a lot. And then that sort of like, no matter what, you're winning. You seem cool, and You seem like you don't need them to talk to you or whatever. And but with legends who really deserve some like starstruckness, sometimes there's a little bit of a of a line to walk there where you do need to go like, hey, thank you, and you're a huge influence of mine. And when there's an obviously huge age gap and stuff like that, in the case of meeting Dolly Parton, I was definitely starstruck when I met her. But again, like by the time I reached a point where I was playing for these people, I was so used to playing the genre. And, just because someone is more famous, it doesn't mean their music is more difficult. Like, I think I would be really, really nervous if, like, the top artists that I was playing for were also the top musicians. That would be really nerve wracking. Like, I think I would get nervous on, like, gosh, who's someone that's just like an incredible, like if Prince was still alive and I was in his band or on one of his sessions, I would be so nervous because like he's the kind of musician that hears everything and he has enough power to not give a crap about cutting someone down. So that would be a really nerve-wracking situation. But like all the really famous people I play for, their music is very simple and it's music that I'm super familiar with. So there was no huge challenge there. The challenge was more about just like being cool and offering enough of my personality in the side of the simple music and figuring out how to insert it to hopefully make myself indispensable to them and get called again.
That's great advice, actually. And also, I love Prince, so anything with Prince in an answer is great with me. What do you think has been the hardest lesson you've ever had to learn as a self-employed musician? So that can either be from a performance sort of side or a songwriter side or even the production side.
Gotcha.
Or all three.
The hardest thing for me has always been like exuding, like owning who I am and not downplaying myself. And I think that, it's impossible to go back and take account for any gigs that I've lost because I haven't gone in the room with confidence and just not even arrogance, but just gone in and remembered like, hey, this is what I can do. This is who I am. I am somebody worth knowing and you want to be around me. And instead I kind of feel I a lot of times I'll go in situations and okay, with the caveat that Hayes Carl says it best in his song about Nashville. They'll tell you that you're nothing just in case that you forget. And I always think about that lyric because it's true that there is always a power dynamic in every situation in music that makes a lot of money. And the biggest challenge for me has been wrangling that power dynamic and not like disappearing under it and owning that people like to be around power and that letting my power shine through and remembering my power is not being an asshole. I think that I would come across as someone more like desirable to work with. That I would if I owned my own power more, and that's just been really hard for me. Again, like music in Nashville is simple. We all know that it's country music, like simple music. The hardest part for me has been the politics and the business and the power dynamic. And I would not say that I'm good at that part. And that's a really important part in producing because you're the boss. And there have been a couple records that I've produced where I've just had to learn that being a boss as the producer is the absolute best thing I could do for anybody and to really own that. And like, it's for the good of the music. It's for the good of the artist and to not feel weird about it,
Yeah.
So, I hope that makes sense.
That makes sense. let's talk about your role as a producer for a couple of minutes.
Mhm.
So, do you kind of find that you literally put on a different hat when you take that role, or are you still
Mm.
sort of thinking more from a I don't want to I think I'm phrasing this a little bit weird, but are you still thinking more from a musician performer point of view, producing the songs
Mm.
that you're producing?
Right, right. It's really both. It's really a tough that's a tough dynamic, especially when I am producing from the bass chair, which is so fun because it's really challenging. And I love being challenged. Like it's such an inspiring spot for me, So um but yeah, it really is hard too. The difference in headspace from when I go into a session producing versus when I go in just as a bass player is huge. I will say though that my bass playing does not change a lot because when I go in as a bass player, the number one thing I'm always listening to, the number one directive as to what I play and how much I play, um, is the song. And as a producer, it's just that, you know, the full completion of that song is under my jurisdiction. Whereas a bass player, it's just the bass line of that song. Um, but I am freed up to really focus on you know my role in the session is just the bass player versus my role as the producer, where I might have to balance um, the artist, the dynamic between the artist and the band, the dynamic between the engineer and the band, the dynamic between the whole band together. I'm sort of having to keep tabs on all of that and really shepherd the song in everybody's part, not only my own. Um, but really, the priorities are the same. It's the song. That's it. So the information is the same. It's really just more multitasking as a producer.
Yeah, whatever makes the song the best basically seems to be the theme of our conversation. It's cool. I love it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's like whatever makes that song, which is basically, it helps for me to think of each song as like like a really short-lived person. What is it that they need to say? What is it that this person needs to say really bad? And making that message as clear as possible. And I do think that with each song and in each scenario, there is a right way, because you can tell when you hit on that right way through listening to that song that things open up emotionally and you can feel everything deeper. And so I just kind of look for that. That's the place where I look for direction, is like, am I feeling this or not? you know
Yeah, that's a good thing to do because if you are feeling it, you know that other people will too, you know?
exactly, exactly.
Talk us through the transition period of, I mean, I know you're still playing, but
Mhm.
let's talk about a bit of the transition period of going from player to producer. Did you kind of
Mhm.
just start saying to people you were playing with, hey, I'm producing now, and word kind of got out and you started getting work as a producer? Or did you actively try and seek work as a producer away
Mhm.
from your playing?
I think it's just sort of it's all of it. Really, it's about which relationships I prioritize with my work time. So I started prioritizing more co-writes because that's when you meet more artists. And then if we have a connection in the writing room, a lot of times that means we'll have a connection making a record. And that's what leads to them saying, hey, will you produce my record? But, especially when you're at my level where I don't have 8 Grammys on the wall and a massive studio. I do have some credits to my name, but they're not like, not every artist is impressed by them. Some are, some aren't. So it's still about building trust with an artist. And a lot of times people hire a producer because they trust that, oh, he's made all of these records I love. So that's a no brainer. I want to work with him. But if they're not aware of the records that I've made, but they just know, hey, when I'm in the room with her, I feel free and I feel like the music we make is the best music that I love. Like, well, then that's a reason for me to produce their record if I'm not coming with a lot of power. So it's really just about pursuing the relationships that need what I have to offer, which is, yeah, like being in the room together and making their music, making their songs speak clearer. And I just pursue more co-writing than like, bending over backwards to make sure I'm available for every demo session and stuff like that.
Great. All right. Here's a bit of a weird one.
Mhm.
On your website, you had a quote of some kind that I loved. It said something along the lines of labels I've been dropped from. And then you listed like it must have been 3 or 4 labels. I thought that was so cool, personally, because I've been doing this a while myself, and I've also been dropped for some labels, but I've never seen someone put it on a website like that, and I was just like, that's fucking cool. so let's talk about this for a second, and I'm gonna kind of tie it into almost part of your answer a little bit earlier, where you were talking about like how you feel about your own power and stuff like that. So let's talk a little bit about self-worth. Some musicians seem to have it in abundance, some don't. But the way you phrased that particular sentence on your website, the reason it appealed to me so much was because it seemed almost as if, and I could be wrong, so don't let me misquote you here, but it seemed almost as if it was kind of I've been signed by these major labels. They dropped me, but I'm still doing my thing, so check me out kind of thing. And I think that's great because it seems empowering.
Yeah,
Now I'm
exactly.
not sure.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Oh, is that what you were going for? Amazing, cool. So I picked it up right
For
because
sure.
I'm not
For
the best
sure. Like,
with signals and stuff. So that's great.
no, absolutely. For sure. It's kind of like a, yeah, of course I've been dropped by labels. Like, whatever.
That's cool.
Or like it's just a part of the whole thing, and it's just kind of funny. I don't know.
No, it's hilarious, and I wanted to kind of figure out a way to talk about, what advice, if you even want to use that word, could you offer up and coming musicians or musicians in general on just trying to keep sides of the bigger picture, their own self worth. Just because you aren't on the top curated playlist on Spotify and signed to whoever the big label of the day is, doesn't mean that you're not important.
That's right. I think that, you know, our self-worth, it comes from our human connection. And I feel like there have been times and certain things in my life I've gotten really lucky with, and certain things I've not been so lucky with. But the thing that I feel I've been super blessed by, you know, fate or God or whatever is finding my soulmate at 21. And I don't think that I would have had the same musical path if I didn't have like my unconditional love covered, because I definitely think that there's something to the way that, I mean, maybe this goes for any pursuit of greatness and any like skill set, but like musicians for sure, it's like our identity as an artist, as a singer, and then that gets affirmed sometimes by economics, and then the more success you have, the more fear you have of your career going the other direction. But it's a lot of that times that's so much worse when you don't have a third party like really seeing you and seeing your soul. And I would just say that, you know, there's no getting around it, that if you pursue a career in music that's highly competitive and where money making is scarce, and the end of it all is like fame and sexiness and power and money, it's like, man, this shit is dirty. This is the climb is not fair. It's not dirty. I would say, like, yeah, sure, pursue that if it's a thrill and if you love it, but never at the sacrifice of human connection. For instance, I was talking with a friend the other day who was like, I got offered this gig that's really cool and it's like totally music I love, but I'd have to be away from my family for 6 weeks at a time. Versus I could keep this other gig that's like, you know, it it's every weekend and it's country and I've been there for a while and it's boring and it's not in line with what I do on my solo work, but it pays the bills and I can be with my family. And I was like, sorry, dude, hands down. Like, you got to take the boring one. You can't sacrifice your family for the music industry. You can't sacrifice um, your love life if you are so blessed to meet your soulmate for a business opportunity. And, you know, even me and Brian, like into our way into our relationship, I think it was the first year we got married. We almost like lost it. We almost got divorced because we were both on the road and both away from each other. And, but we came together and looked what was happening straight in the eye and said, okay, we have a rule. We cannot be away from each other for longer than 10 days at a time. If it's been longer than 10 days, we book a flight. We go into debt. We save our love. We keep our careers. We figure out the money thing later. And that's what we did. We've always chosen each other over success in music. And I really do think that that is the key because life makes art. Art does not make life. And the music industry sure as fuck doesn't. Like, it's not going to reward you for hard work. It's not going to reward you for loyalty. It's not going to do anything other than pay you when you can make it money. And that's it.
That's cool. Powerful stuff. You should consider making that a theme for a song. The whole, you know, him on the road, her on the road, relationship taking strain, came together, found this agreement, even if it meant having hard times. That's a cool theme.
It was a pretty potent time. We really understood at the time what was at stake, you know?
Yeah. No, it sounds like it. I'm glad you guys made it happen, man. That's, you know, again, success story. Everyone's so quick to talk about the failure stories or think that everybody's an overnight success, which is never the case. But so success
Never.
stories need to be celebrated more, I think, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rachel, I've got one more question for you. And
Yeah.
I ask everybody this question. So if you feel like you've answered it, then just ignore me. But
Good.
in turn for the hardest thing you learned, what would you say has been the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to your musical career?
Let me think about that.
Yeah, take your time. It's a loaded one.
Gosh. Okay, I have two.
Go for it.
One about making music and one that's about shepherding your career.
Okay.
They're both they weren't directed at me. They were things that I read in interviews that stuck with me. One was from Willie Weeks, an interview. I think it was like a bass player magazine interview, and he's like one of my favorite bass players in Nashville. And he was talking about being in the studio, and he said, I always just try to play that song the best it can be played on that day, no matter what. Meaning being a part of in that moment with that band, in that studio, with that engineer, with this song and me on bass. I'm going to get on board with making this song the best it can be right now. And that really came to me at a time where I was getting kind of burned out on being in the studio and I couldn't figure out where my motivation was. And then I read that and I said, oh, so it's not about me. It's about this song. And it just kind of launched me to the next level of understanding music. And I will always remember that. And then the other thing is actually from Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights. I think it's called Green Lights. Which is a really entertaining book at times, and then other times you just kind of have to skip through some sludge. But he had this one story about him being in LA and having a roommate that had a little more going on career-wise than him. And he came to the roommate and was like, or maybe this roommate was like sort of a powerful producer type or something. And he said, man, I got to make some money, or I got to leave. You know, I got to make some money. I need a job. And that guy said to him, get that desperation out of here and leave town. Do not get that on me or in here. It's not allowed. Like, desperation in your career, especially at this stage in the music industry where opportunities are even more scarce and money making is next to impossible. To have any sort of desperation where you're going in and asking people for a chance and you know, please hire me and blah, blah, blah. Man, that just does not work. You have to know you're great, go in there and not need it. And however you get to that point, whether it's through a secret side hustle where you pay your bills with, that you tell nobody about, that makes you feel secure so that you can go into these writers rounds or into these 2-for-1s or into these into the, you know, backstage at the touring show, and where you're trying to make connections and get your career going. Like, you cannot have an air of, I need this from you, because it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think that figuring out how to get on respectful terms with the music industry, where it doesn't have to provide for you, or it doesn't have to be something for you, is the way to do that at the core. And again, I go back to me getting my love from my husband, who sees me fully, who accepts me as I am. That takes away my desperation for love. And I think anytime you have that, people smell it and they go, that's a loser. I'm not going to touch them because I'm trying to climb. And that's the music culture in Nashville, or music industry culture. And I read that, and I just always think about that, because of course the desperation creeps up into all of us, even the most powerful people who are at the top. They're desperate to not leave the top. And I know a lot of these people, and they're not happier or anything, and that desperation is still there. But you have to figure out a way to not be desperate for it and somehow stay in the game. So, yeah.
That's very cool. I love it.
Thanks.
I love it. Rachel, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
What's the best way for our listeners to get hold of you if they're looking for any production or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Instagram. My profile is Rachel_M_Loy, Loy. DM me on Instagram. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. Sometimes I can be sort of slow, but if you write me, I'll see it, and I'll write you back.
Awesome. Okay, and we're going to end this thing here. So thank you for your time, Rachel. We'll talk again in the future.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Awesome. I would like to thank Rachel Loy for her time. Please go check her out. As I mentioned in the intro, super insightful human being, and just a wonderful musician, so totally worth checking out. My name is Travis Mark. You can find out more about me at travismark.com. You can find out more about the Musician's Mentor at musicians-mentor.com. As mentioned already, but I'll continue to mention it, please give us a rating, a review, a share, or a follow as we continue to create content. We appreciate it. But until next time, keep doing your thing. I believe in you. You should believe in you. Peace.